Now, the Buckeye Extra podcast with Rob Aller, Bill Rabinowitz, and Joey Kaufman from the Columbus Dispatch.
Well, that was maybe a more interesting Nebraska game than either of us expected. I'm Joey Kaufman, joined by Bill Rabinowitz for a two-man edition of the Cover 2 edition of the Buckeye Extra Football Podcast. Bill, I don't know if we expected there to be that much drama late in the fourth quarter against Nebraska, but I did say on our preview podcast that it could be a revealing game for just how Ohio State responds to a loss. And I can't say it was terribly encouraging for the Buckeyes.
It was a win that felt like a loss in a lot of ways, but at the end of the season, depending on how it goes, as Will Howard said, a win is a win. And all they count is that. But you're right. I mean, I don't think anyone expected 21-17 and having to rally, especially, they go up 14-3 in the second quarter, two big plays by Will Howard, first to Carnell Tate, and then the second one to Jeremiah Smith. And think, okay, they're off to the races. Nebraska gave it their best shot, and this will be another Ohio State romp. Instead, the offense just went in the tank. The defense started giving up yards and points. They kept them out of the end zone until Nebraska went ahead with 10 minutes to go. But no, I mean, you could feel it in the stadium, the angst and the what in the world is going on? There were boos after Garvel Reese got ejected for targeting. There were some bottles thrown. It wasn't crazy like the one game. What was the one game a couple weeks ago? But it was, there were a few. But look, they did come back and they did win. The defense held Nebraska the last two possessions. But there's a lot to digest, and probably the biggest thing is the offensive line.
Yeah, that looks like an alarming situation at this point in time. And we knew going into the game that losing Josh Simmons was a big loss. He was really a big reason why the offensive line as a whole was much better this year. Really, really much improved from that spot as well. Really great in pass protection. They've been effective running behind him as well. And no matter who you threw out there were going to be issues. But until he got hurt, Zen Mahalski really had trouble as the blindside protection for Will Howard. Gave up 2 sacks, contributed to another play where Howard fumbled that did get recovered. But he was under constant pressure from that side. That's really where a lot of the pass protection issues started. But even outside of Zen, the whole offensive line did not perform all that well anyway, especially in the running game. I mean, they just could not move the ball on the ground. They could not move the ball in short yardage spots. It was telling at the end of the game when it was 4th and 1 on their game-winning touchdown drive that they threw the ball in that situation. Will Howard looked to Mekabuka and threw a quick out route to him. But yeah, the offensive line, this is not good timing to have offensive line problems, preparing to go play at Penn State with a really good defensive end in Abdul Carter.
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting game. I mean, I don't know what they're going to do at left tackle. We'll find out tomorrow, maybe, from Ryan Day.
This on Monday, October 28th.
Right.
The date is here.
So we will hear on Tuesday when Ryan Day and presumably Chip Kelly will speak to us, along with hopefully Jim Knowles. We'll find out what their plan is. I think their plan would be to move Donovan Jackson from left guard to left tackle, and then probably have Austin Servell play left guard, I would guess. Another option would be to move Tegrif Shabola from right guard to left tackle. He's a natural tackle, but they do want him settled in at one position this year. It's kind of the Paris Johnson thing where he's a natural tackle, but they want him playing guard and feeling at home there and not shuffle him around. But I don't know what they're going to do. I mean, I don't know that they really have many other options right now. And against Penn State, that's going to be tough. But Penn State's got their own issues, right? They might not have their quarterback, so it's going to be a battle of banged up teams, and they all have a couple others, defensive end, and their right tackle is left the Wisconsin game. So there's a lot of mystery going into this game.
Yeah, both rosters are important, and Aller's presence is a big deal because this year he had really made strides as a downfield passer. Look, when the Ohio State fans last saw him at Ohio Stadium last year, he had trouble. I mean, he was just really limited as a passer, and that was a big reason. It almost seemed like he's an Ohio native playing at home, and the horseshoe was tough. Maybe just you think about all the pressure from that side of it, but he was better this year. I think so far. I'm looking up his like the average depth per target. This year it's 9.6 yards per target. Last year was 8 yards per target. So he's been more willing to push the ball downfield a little more for them. Their offenses seem to open up, and so if they don't have him and they're in a situation using a backup quarterback who's much more of a runner, that certainly changes things, because when Ohio State played at Oregon in that top five matchup, the secondary was a big vulnerability in the way Dylan Gabriel was able to take some shots. So if Aller can't go, that changes quite a bit for Ohio State, the back end of Ohio State's defense.
Their backup is Bo Prabula, who's coincidentally from York, which is where I came from before coming to Columbus. To tell you how long I've been here, he was not even alive when I left. So anyway, he was impressive in the Wisconsin game. He came in. He's fast. I mean, he's faster. He's a better runner than Drew Aller. Can throw it some. I don't think he's the passer that Aller is. Otherwise, he'd be the starter, I suppose. But it's a different dimension. They're two very different kind of quarterbacks. We know Penn State is not all that explosive on offense. Their receivers are nothing like Oregon's. Ohio State fans will know that Julian Fleming is now a Nittany Lion. They have good running backs, pretty good offensive line, very good defensive line. Now they're missing Danny, I forget the last name. It's a hyphenated name. I'm sorry. It's slipping my mind.
The guy who's opposite Carter?
Right. But Abdul Carter's their star. And he's a speed rusher. He's an edge rusher. And Ohio State likes to say we go against the best defensive ends in the country and all that stuff. And look, Jack Sawyer and JT Tuimoloau are very good. They're not the kind of twitchy, fast, beat you with one step off the edge that Abdul Carter is. So they haven't seen anything quite like that. But this is coming into the year, I thought this was not going to be that tough a game for Ohio State, other than the crowd, which is always tough. But I just didn't think that Penn State matched up well with Ohio State. Now, considering that Ohio State's offensive line is shaky, and Penn State's strength is their defensive line, I'm not sure how I feel about the matchup.
If you don't have, offensive line issues can really doom a team, especially at left tackle. And there just aren't a lot of great options for Ohio State to go with in this situation, because there are not really any experienced tackles on the roster at all. The next guy who's probably in line as a pure tackle is George Fitzpatrick, who's played 54 snaps this year, according to Pro Football Focus. And Zen Michalski was their next best option, presumably ahead of him. Maybe shuffling around could help, because you have, I think, Austin Serville's proven this year that he can be a capable, dependable interior guard, the way he filled in for Donovan Jackson in the first two games against Akron and Western Michigan. But then you're starting with a bunch of guys who are sort of out of position. So it's a difficult situation that they're probably going to have to mask a little bit, just the way they game plan and prepare. But they also had 2 weeks to prepare for Nebraska, and it seemed like it almost caught them by surprise.
Yeah, I kind of expected Nebraska to be demoralized after getting just crushed at 56-7 by Indiana the week before. I thought, okay, they're going to come in and if Indiana did this to us, what's Ohio State going to do with us? But they played well. They did not flinch. They hung in there. They outplayed Ohio State for a huge chunk of the game. The middle quarters, they dominated that game. If not for the two big plays, the two long touchdown passes, they win. The thing that's got to just drive Nebraska fans crazy is this is the same old story for them. They're the ultimate close, but can't close the deal.
They had those touchdown drives where they weren't touchdown drives where several times they brought the ball on the goal line. Ohio State got the stop or held them to a field goal. So that was, I think, really critical in why the Buckeyes were able to win. I do think the defense, there will be deserved hand-wringing this week about the state of Ohio State's offensive line. I thought the defense did, at least to a large degree, kind of stop the bleeding a little bit. There was so much talk about 2 weeks about the state of the defense and how was that still their strength? Where do they go? They were playing shorthanded without Lathan Ransom, but patched things together in the secondary, moving Jordan Hancock to safety. And I think largely did well for the most part. It was not perfect, and there were some issues, but when they got the stops they needed to in those last two drives in the fourth quarter, Cody Simon played really well, sort of snuffing out some of those screen passes. They didn't allow the big plays. So I think there were some at least some good things from that side of the ball.
Yeah, we know Nebraska's not a very explosive team.
Right.
And they did have a one catch. The guy made a tremendous catch. It was ruled to be an incompletion on review. Denzel Burke had good coverage. It was a deep ball, nice throw, but boy, I mean, that was a great attempt to catch that. But Nebraska's just not a particularly explosive team. I tell you the one thing that was concerning, and if I'm an offensive coach and I'm thinking, okay, how do I get an easy, cheap first down or bail myself out? I throw it to Davis Igbinosun's side and hope he gets a pass interference call. We know he's very handsy. We know that Ohio State has been okay with his ultra aggressiveness, but you can't mug guys, and that's what he was doing. He got called 3 times. 2 were enforced. He's a very good player. I don't think he needs to be that way, but they're going to call it now. And if you start to get a reputation, then they're going to call it even more. And so I think that's something that they need to kind of have him temper his aggressiveness. But Denzel Burke did have a bounce back game. He made a couple of really nice tackles. He's a prideful guy, and I expected him to play well. And he did. And so, I always thought the Oregon game was a bit of an aberration for him. He's not suddenly a bad player. Just had a bad game. And Oregon's good enough. Their receivers are fast enough to exploit it, and they certainly did. But, Cody Simon played well. I thought JT Tuimoloau played well. We know what he did 2 years ago against Penn State, where he basically single-handedly won the game for Ohio State. Ty Hamilton had a sack. Tyreek Williams had a sack. So, there are lots of promising signs. But I still didn't like the way that Nebraska there was a couple drives where it was like 14 yards, 15 yards, like boom, boom, boom. And you're like, wait a minute, what's going on here?
Yeah, and some of the stuff you saw with broken plays and Raiola being able to scramble when there was a third down where they brought pressure, and it's one thing not to get the sack, but geez, you don't want him to take off running for 38 yards. It was, I think, worth trying to look at some of the alignments, the way they lined up, how much pressure they brought. It didn't seem like a ton changed from Oregon, especially you look at the blitz frequency. It didn't really change all that much, but they were better at getting home this week and getting some sacks. All 3 of their sacks came off blitzes. That was, I think, better for them. But part of that, I think, is a product of who you're playing as the quarterback, because Gabriel is really good at sort of feeling the rush and navigating the pocket as you would expect for a guy like him. Should we talk about Ohio State's fifth year quarterback as well, Will Howard? I thought he continues to play well. He's a big reason why they won the game with his legs and his arm. Yeah,
he completed his first 10 passes. But like the offense in the second half, he didn't do much in the second half. The one big play was, I had a couple, but the one big play was the pass to Carnell Tate along the sideline that started the last touchdown drive. That was a long gain. He scrambled to set up his touchdown throw to Quinshon Judkins. So he had the one terrible interception. I guess he just didn't see the safety. He threw a kind of fade pass to Emeka Egbuka that was just not a good idea. But other than that, he played very well. I think if you're an Ohio State fan, you have to be very pleased with what he's given you this year. He's not the flashiest guy in the world. He's, he doesn't have C.J. Stroud's arm. On one of the touchdown passes, the ball was the one to Carnell Tate. It was underthrown a little bit. The one to Jeremiah Smith was perfect. But he's accurate. He's poised. He rarely makes mistakes. He gives you the running option to prolong drives. So I think he's giving you what you want to get from him. To me, the concern is if you can't run the ball with a quarterback who's capable of running, and TreVeyon Henderson and Quinshon Judkins, and you're getting less than 3 yards a carry, that's a problem. And they're not going to go far if they can't run the ball.
Right. And you lost your left tackle, but your left guard was still there. Your center was still there.
Right.
Same guard and same tackle. So that to me, I think certainly the pass protection on the left side blew up some plays and contributed to some of their issues of pass protection, but I feel like you should be able to run the ball better than they did. I as far as Will Howard goes, I thought his deep ball looked better this week against Nebraska. The throw he hit to Jeremiah Smith was in stride, well timed. The other one to Cardinal Tate I thought was pretty good too. Fitting over 3 defenders. Maybe he slows down a little bit at the end, but still, you can throw that out of the back of the end zone if you put too much on it. So overall, he attempted 2 passes of 20 air yards or more, completed both of them. So that's an area I think that's grown. I mean, I think the first month or two of the season, you wanted to see that Ohio State actually upgraded quarterback and all that. Well, if you'd watched the Pitt Syracuse game on Thursday night, I think you have the answer to that question probably as well. I think he's clearly an upgrade over Kyle McCord at this point in the season. I don't think he's maybe a C.J. Stroud level quarterback, but certainly they've done well for themselves in upgrading that position in the portal. And I think for Ohio State to reach its goals, I think Will Howard's capable of doing it. I think they have other questions on the roster. Can they figure out their running game? And if they don't, that's the big issue, because you're going to put a lot on the plate of Will Howard. I mean, you look at Ohio State versus Georgia, where they truly had a non-existent running game because running backs didn't really exist on the roster at that point 2 years ago. And C.J. Stroud had to have this Herculean effort to try to will them to a win against Georgia, and he couldn't do that. So I think that's the situation. I think if you're an Ohio State fan, you're concerned about it. If you can't fix the running game and you can't fix the offensive line, then I think that puts Will Howard in too difficult of a position to carry you where you want to go.
Yeah, I think the whole season is, can they fix the left tackle and by extension the offensive line? I mean, all it takes is one guy to not be able to perform, to blow up a play. One guy who doesn't make his block and the quarterback gets hit and fumbles, that's the game. I mean, you got to have 11 pieces. You can't have 10. And I feel pretty confident about 10 right now. But they got to figure that out. And as Ryan Day has often said, there's no waiver wire in football. You got to make do with what you got. And that this is why they get the big bucks. They got to figure this out, but because there's no obvious solution. I mean, Donovan Jackson's never played tackle in college. It's just look, I'd rather lose your left tackle than lose your quarterback, which is what Penn State might be facing. But still,
yeah. In some ways, this game reminded me of the Cotton Bowl last year, where they put in Lincoln Kienholz after Devin Brown goes in, and it seemed like the quarterbacks were totally unprepared. It just seemed like they were totally unprepared for game planning around Zen Michalski there, just where you had extra time, and
they had an extra week. And there were plays I wondered, not just, okay, he missed the block. When I watched this game again, I was like, what is he doing? I don't know what he's trying to do, let alone not succeeding. And look, I don't want to be harshly or too harsh. He was given his best shot and he got hurt at the end of the game. So I hope he is better. I hope he's better health wise, and I hope he's better if he plays performance wise. But it's our job to tell it like it is, and it wasn't good.
No, I think about that one play. I don't know if it was attributed to the pressure or how it goes down on any sort of box score, but there was one play where he got beat on the edge and then tackling the Nebraska player, which I really had not seen that sort of circumstance. But hey, you got to be able to try to help out your line or inexperience, maybe with some design stuff to roll away or do some things like that. But they're going to have to be a little more creative in how they line up. I do think if Aller is not able to go this week against Penn State, we can talk about this more when we preview the game. But if Aller can't go, it does maybe change the game a little bit. Maybe you worry less about being any sort of track meet and that sort of situation.
Their quarterback can run, and I'm assuming he can throw it some. I mean, I don't think he's a 5-star guy now. But he was. I mean, I talked with my friend at the York Daily Record, and he said that Pribula was beat out Marvin Harrison Jr. for Player of the Year in Pennsylvania. I forget what year it was, but so he's not some guy off the street. He's pretty good, and he's kind of waited. I guess he's a little bit like their Devin Brown, in that he's been there a while, and now he gets a shot potentially.
Rarity these days, I guess, where you have a guy sticking around like that.
Yeah. So,
but that's where Ohio State stands after its 21-17 win over the Nebraska Cornhuskers. Penn State's on tap. Ohio State heads to Happy Valley this upcoming weekend. We will have more as we preview that game in the days ahead. That was Bill Rabinowitz. I'm Joey Kaufman. Thanks for joining us and listening to us on this episode of the Buckeye Extra Football Podcast.
Be sure and subscribe to the Buckeye Extra Podcast in the iTunes Store, the Google Play Store, or on Stitcher.